everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while. I swear if I were like a celebrity, people would start assuming I had buccal fat removal in like the 2 months that I've basically haven't been around. No, that hasn't been the case. That hasn't been the case. But yeah, it's just, I haven't really been inspired, to be honest. I haven't really been wanting to do YouTube. I haven't even been wanting to watch YouTube, to be honest. I just haven't kind of not wanted to do anything with the internet at all. Hair update, I still haven't made the decision to go straight yet, but I'm seeing now that I still have a long way to go before my natural hair grows out entirely. I don't know what to do. I'm dealing with the humidity here in Japan already, and I'm starting to lose patience. So I still need to make a decision. In the meantime, let me discuss with you what I read in the month of April. I actually read quite a bit, possibly because I haven't been distracted by YouTube. But I'm going to be discussing these books kind of in a strange way. So let me tell you what I read before telling you anything specific about them. So I read the nonfiction Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, An Indian History of the American West by D. Brown. I read Eugénie, Grande by Balzac. I read Oil by Upton Sinclair. I read Welcome to Hard Times by E.L. Doctorow. I read Les 50 millions de la Begum, the Begums Fortune by Jules Verne. I also read and finished Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. And then I ended up finishing off the month by reading volume 16 through 25 of the soccer manga Be Blues in Japanese. So that's everything I read in April. And the reason I mentioned that today's review is going to be a little off is because of this book. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. So this book is a nonfiction that explores basically the end of the final Native American tribes that were in the US. So it focuses on basically from the period of the 1860s to 1880s. So these 20 years, which was basically the final push to eliminate the tribes, the final push to either basically kill everyone or just move them to reservations, basically take over their land, move them to reservations, and create peace with the Native American population. So this book, basically, every chapter is basically going after different tribes. So you have the Cherokees, the Cheyennes, you have the Utes, you have the Apaches, you have the Sioux, you have just all these different tribes, and basically every single chapter focuses on one particular tribes, and it focuses on the particular tribe leaders of the time. So this book is filled with gorgeous photographs of the portraits of these chiefs and whatnot. But yeah, so every chapter goes with them, and it just goes over basically their final years, the final moments where the Native American population is trying to find a way to reach an agreement with the new white population that's taking over their land. And it's basically just telling them, like, we want peace. Like, we want to live in conjunction with you guys. We don't want there to be all this killing. We're not interested in that. We really just want peace. But the way that we want peace is we want the freedom to be able to travel our lands, to keep ownership of our lands, and to keep the ability to live our life. And then just have you guys share that with us. But obviously, the white population was basically like, no, we don't want that. We want everything, basically. So you have to deal with what we want. Because we're not going to compromise and give you what you want. And the thing is that this is basically told all in the perspective of the Native American population. So the reason that this nonfiction book is so famous, it's basically the most famous nonfiction about Native American population in the US, is the fact that this was the first book basically that gave the perspective of this history through the viewpoint of the Native American tribes. So basically all the white men, all the soldiers and the colonels and lieutenants, within this book are all called by their Indian names. So basically the names that the tribes gave them when they met them. So it could be like the Black Hat Man, or the White Haired Man, or the Old Man of the Thunder, etc. So because of that, it was the first book that really showed that the Native Americans are the victims here. It wasn't the white people who are the victims of Native Americans having people on the frontier being killed, etc. It's like, no, it's the other way around. So this book was ideal for that. And it's a really, really beautiful book. I really enjoyed this. But here's the thing. Reading this affected all of my other reads in April in the most interesting way. It wasn't really like a mood killer or anything like that, but it was a question of timeline. Because, as I mentioned, so this book takes place, talks about the timeline basically between the 1860s and the 1880s, right? And the thing is that in this book, at the beginning of each chapter, basically they give, or the author basically gives like a very brief sort of outline of what has happened in that particular year. So here for the Powder River invasion in 1865, it gives you standard history like April 2nd, the Confederates abandoned Richmond, April 9th, Lee surrenders to Grant, etc., etc. And then always at like the very last sentences is usually something that doesn't involve the Indians, but it's just a quip about something that's going on either in the world or just something that's interesting. So in this particular page, and quite common in these sort of outlines, Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and Tolstoy's War and Peace published, okay? So a lot of these little outlines actually mentions books that were published at the time this was happening. And that really made me look at what I was reading very, very differently, because I read the Belgiums Fortune by Jules Verne, and this was written in 1879. And the plot of this is that you have this French man who discovers that he is the sole inheritor of this fortune. Basically, his great grandfather or some relation of the sort had married this widow in Bangladesh, and that widow was basically the widow of this great sultan sort of position in Bangladesh, who had this great fortune, just diamonds and just land and palaces, etc., etc. And so he becomes the sole inheritor, or so he thinks. What happens, it turns out there's another man in Germany who also happens to have relations with this Begum. And so they split the inheritance, and it becomes this huge thing where like the German guy, the German man decides to seek revenge against France for all of its sort of evil doings in terms of history. Like Germany wants to prove its superiority over France. And so this German man takes that as his personal mission. And so basically what happens is that while our French man, who is a scientist, decides that he wants to create a utopia, a utopic city where everyone in society has the perfect function and everyone contributes, and everyone has this sort of same sense of community and education, and everyone encourages another. So while the Frenchman is all about his utopic city, the German man is about proving his superiority. And so he creates his own city, which is actually its only goal, or the man's only goal, is basically to destroy this French man's goals. And so they both end up building their cities in the basically what is the state of Oregon in America, basically at the same time period that this was published, which is 1879, which is basically when this is happening. So you have that. And then I also read Welcome to Hard Times by E.L. Doctorow, which is this fairly quite harrowing tale about this this one town in the Dakota territory, where basically it's a very small town, and this one wild man, just like think evil man, like think Cormac McCarthy, Blood Meridian, think in terms of like the Western feel, but also think about Cormac McCarthy's like Child of God, which is actually my favorite McCarthy so far, which basically just states that some men are just evil for the sake of being evil. They don't have any logical reasoning. They don't have any sort of motive or idea of why they're doing evil. They're just evil. And so one of these men comes into this town in the Dakota Territory and basically just spreads evil. He comes in, he's boisterous, he takes over the salon, he drinks a lot of alcohol, he rapes the women, then he kills them after he rapes them, and then he kills a lot of other men in the town. And basically most of the town decides to flee, and we're left with our mayor, a little boy Jimmy, whose father had been killed by this man, and then Molly, a prostitute, and then this one Indian man. So those four, with the mayor, or basically the mayor, decides he wants to rebuild this town. And it deals with the idea of rebuilding this town in the middle of the frontier, and it deals with the idea of hope and promise and idealism. But the thing is that it's a town that's built basically on this idea of evil, and it's this town that's built based off the mayor's guilt for how much of a coward he had been when that evil man had come into the town and destroyed everything. And he names the town Hard Times, hence Welcome to Hard Times. So he names he renames the town Hard Times. And basically it's a book that you can never get a grip on that sense, on any sense of hope or any sense of promise or idealism that this is going to be a flourishing town, because you know that it's a town built on cowardice and guilt and like rape and murder. And so you know it can only go in one direction. And just like Molly the prostitute keeps saying, this is only going to go in one direction. And the mayor is just too cowardly to admit it, and he just keeps pushing his agenda. So it's a really, really gripping book. But the thing is that, again, when it comes to this book, this is basically the time period that Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee is happening. Maybe a little bit more before this time, but basically there is the same timeline. Now there's only one Indian character in this book, and I would say he has quite a bit of a minor role. He never speaks in the book, but he just serves as sort of like the town doctor, and he goes through his own hardships due to these white men. But again, same sort of time period. So then I read Oil by Upton Sinclair. Now, as it says on this cover, this book, you'll see it has a flag, a sort of banner for There Will Be Blood, the movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, which is an excellent movie. But the thing is that's important to know about Oil is that Oil is not, so the movie There Will Be Blood is not based entirely off Oil. It's inspired by this book, Oil by Upton Sinclair. It's basically, the movie basically takes the feeling of the first 100 pages of this book, takes a few of the characters, the father figure, the son figure, the characters of Paul and Eli, and it takes them, and it does change their characters for the movie, but it does basically is based off this father-son relationship within the oil industry, within the creation of the oil industry. Now, this book by itself, there's a beautiful tagline that says, a classic tale of greed and corruption. And this is exactly what this is. I absolutely love this book, but it does have a lot of flaws, I would say. So the thing is that to separate this book from There Will Be Blood, this basically is a book about a man who is raising his son to be the great inheritor of his oil career. And the thing is that they have a very, very solid relationship, him and his son. He really does love his son, unlike the movie. But the thing is that the father figure is definitely about the oil industry and about becoming this great oil magnate within the industry. And he's very much competitive, and he wants to do better than everyone else. At the beginning, his son very much believes that his father is doing all of these things for the good of humanity and for the good of oil. And the thing, he really believes that his father does these things because he actually wants things done properly. He doesn't want to take advantage of his workers. He wants, he believes his father is doing everything for the safety of his workers, to protect his workers. He is trying not to take advantage of the people who own this land that he's trying to buy. But eventually the young son becomes very much, he gets taken by this character, Paul. Paul is the twin brother, or they're not twins in the book, I think. Yeah, they're not twins in the book. They're twins in the movie, but they're not twins in the book. But Paul is the older brother of the young Eli, and Eli, if you know in the movie, is the one who gets corrupted. So the movie is basically about the two different types of corruption between the father figure and Eli, while this book is really about the corruption in every part of society. But it's actually really quite a remarkable book. But basically, you get this young character, the son, who becomes a huge idealist. He goes very much into communism. He believes then that turns into socialism, and he becomes this huge socialist. And then when you have the Bolshevik Revolution and in Russia, he sides very much with the Reds. He sides very much with the Bolsheviks, even though America is really trying to push the agenda that the Bolsheviks are wrong, the communists are wrong, the socialists are wrong. Capitalism is the only market there is. It's the most. It's the superior. Ism, basically. So you have our young character who is basically having this battle between wanting to support his father, but he is struggling as the idea of basically he has so much privilege being this rich young boy, but he sides more with the with the lower class. He sides more with the laborers, the workers, who are basically, he feels, getting taken advantage by rich people. Now, the thing that I say that is the book has major flaws is in the sense that Upton Sinclair is fantastic about dealing with all these topics. His writing is superb, absolutely beautiful writing. I would definitely say that the first 150 pages are the strongest. Like that, those 150 pages carry you through the book. And I do think he gets a little bit lost later on, because the thing that's the flaw of this book is that he kind of puts everything in the book. So you have the Bolsheviks, the Red Scare, you have capitalism versus communism versus socialism, you have America versus the Russians, you have the upper class versus the labor class, you have corruption, discussion of corruption basically at every single level of every single aspect of American society. And then you also talk about Hollywood and how about America uses Hollywood to create this image to basically serve as propaganda of creating the perfect image of, Russia bad, US good, socialism bad, capitalism good. You should want to be look at our Hollywood female darlings and how beautiful they are and their white beautiful skin and things like that, and look at how these bad laborers, etc., etc. Then it talks about, I would say like the last big fourth to almost a half of the book is pretty much about the Bolshevism and Red Scare and all of that. And so Upton Sinclair, I think at some point you do get a little bit bogged down by everything he includes, but I understand Sinclair's reason for that, because it's all tied together. It all connects, it all feeds into each other. And so, yeah, you ended up with this really, really amazing tale about greed and corruption, and basically how our young main character is just torn between his father, who he believes is this beautiful man who really is trying to do the best, but he realized little by little that actually maybe his father also is part of this idea of greed and corruption within capitalism. So it's a really, really fantastic book. But again, when it comes to this book, this takes place in the 1920s, only 40 years after this is done. So in terms of timeline, it was just making me think about just the progress in American society in 40 years. And I just thought that was mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. Okay, so it's just, because you think about this, and this book has no mentions of any sort of Native American population whatsoever. It doesn't talk anything about America in its past. It's all about pushing America forward, creating the great America, the great capitalist America, having America be the great controller of oil worldwide, because at a certain point of the book, they do go past Southern California, it goes more into America, and then eventually they push abroad at a certain point. So it definitely is about making America this great country to live in, which is something that is so superior to Russia and how the way things Russia is doing. Okay, so there's not even mention about its past, America's past, and all the things they had to do. It's all about pushing America to the future, and it is pushing America to the future while using corruption and greed. Okay, so in terms of timeline, it's absolutely crazy. And then after that, reading To Android's Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, and this was written in the 70s, and this book itself takes place in 2021, so our current age. So again, you think about timeline and you think of what seems like not that big of a jump. So you have 1920s corruption, greed, capitalist America turning into a 1970s author writing about what he thinks America will be in 2021. And it's really not that much. 1920s, 1970, 50-year gap. And then it's a 1970s man thinking about another 50 years in the future. And just thinking about the difference in what's happened within all these timelines. So Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Again, another super famous book. This ended up being the inspiration to the movie Blade Runner. The movie and the book are very different. I actually kind of think the movie's better, to be honest. I will tell you that. But this was still an excellent book. So Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is basically, again, an America in 2020, where basically, well, it's actually more Earth, but it's America based. It is America based. It does takes place basically in San Francisco, in the whereabouts of that city. And basically, what happened is that the Earth can basically not really be. So basically, there's another world war. It's killed a bunch of millions, and it's kind of destroyed the Earth in terms of how hospitable it is, or how habitable it is. And so the majority of the population goes to Mars. And basically, to help humans create a new society, a new community on Mars, they are assisted by humanoid robots. The human robots are basically like the new sort of slave class, to be honest. They're there to help sort of as laborers. They're basically home laborers, but outdoor laborers, etc. But the thing is that there is a group of these humanoid androids that have escaped and are now on Earth. And the thing is that this is very much illegal, because the thing is that they are so technically and technologically advanced that they're almost indistinguishable from humans, and that could be it's considered that could be very dangerous to the human race, especially if you were to consider that if they were to become too superior to the human race, they might want to take over the human race. As always, human race is very much most afraid of things that can act human, because we know how humans act to other humans, but also to other things. We're very good at extinguishing other races. We're very good at extinguishing other cultures. We're very good at extinguishing animals. We're very good at extinguishing the environment. We're very good at human race. We are very good at killing and extinguishing to set ourselves up as the superior race, right? And so the idea of humanoid androids being able to do the same thing to us basically means that they want to take preventative measures against these humanoid androids and sort of eliminate them before anything can happen in the other way around. So basically, our protagonist is a bounty hunter, and he is hired to get rid of 6 androids who use the new Nexus 6 system that is basically considered so superior that they're really basically nearly impossible to differentiate between them and humans. The only thing they can do is work on the hypothesis, on the idea that androids, no matter how much they look like humans, they will never have the ability for empathy like humans do. So basically, they're tested on their concepts of empathy. So basically, you have this bounty hunter that goes over these androids, and it just goes through that book. Now, the thing about this book that is very different from the movie is you have a few concepts that don't show up in the movie. There's this idea of electric animals, which is the whole reason between the electric sheep, because a lot of the creatures, the animals on Earth, have been Well, most of them are extinct. They don't exist. Humans will always have a need to be connected to nature, even though they're obsessed with eliminating nature. There is a relationship between nature and man that is important, even if man tends to forget that. So you have, it's very normal for normal citizens to want to have basically pets in their homes, but obviously most animals are dead, so they have to do electric versions of them. Then there's this whole concept of the characters using these sort of machines in their home. So something as simple as an air humidifier, air purifier for us in current modern tales. They have instrument machines like that, but one of them is like a mood creator. So you can push a different button and it'll set up your mood to be what you want it to be. If you know you're gonna have a rough day at work, you could choose the button that says, make it to where I'm gonna have a gung-ho personality, a feet forward personality, something that can defy all challenges, and I'll still look for the positive sides of things, and I'll be able to really work at a high processing level. Or if you want to have sexy times with your spouse, you could create a mood maker that makes you feel like more just like sexually desirable, or desiring, I should say, of your partner. So you have like a mood board machine. There's also this one machine that's connected to this concept of mercerism, where they follow and they basically hold on. To me, I imagine a sort of treadmill where you're walking on a treadmill, or maybe a Stairmaster. And in the handles, you have what I would assume would be like electrodes that give you electric signals. Where basically they're following this man who has this idea that you need to always be, that humanity is always climbing a mountain, and humanity wants to reach the top of this mountain, but can it? And what do you do if you reach it? And so it's basically this whole new age ideology. And all of that comes crumbling down when everything's discovered to basically be fake. So it's the whole idea of basically humans versus androids, and our modern day humans, basically, have they lost the sense of empathy, or do they only face empathy when they're told how to empathize? Have we lost our ability to be human, to feel what it's like to be human, without the need of all these mood enhancers and all these mood stabilizers, or basically religion to tell us how to be moral? Because mercerism is basically a metaphor for our religion that we have in the world, whereas a lot of people, it's very common for religious people. You see it on the internet all the time, where someone will be like, how do atheists know what morals are if they have no God? And atheists, we tend to say, well, we don't need someone to tell us what the right thing is to do, because that should be an innate feeling within humans. So it really is about that. So just like humans who dream of sheep to fall asleep, if an android were to fall asleep, would he dream of an electric version? So that's where the title comes from. So it really comes with all these amazing ideas and concepts. Now, is it as well executed as I would have hoped? No, I think it kind of goes a little bit, I think it kind of loses its mark towards the end. But the thing about the Philip K. Dick is that he presents ideas and he presents concepts that are so fascinating, and they're well done in that sense. So his books, whether or not you end up giving it 5 stars or just 3 stars or whatnot, I think no matter what, you're always going to get something out of them, and it's always going to make you think. And this book really does make you think. So again, another book that I read. But that's the thing. So it just all leads to this idea of the timeline with the wounded, oh my gosh, even having read the book now, I still can't get the title right. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. It just really made me think about the timeline of books and how they fit into one another. Because the thing is that, like, especially these books that basically deal more primarily with the same timeline, with the Jules Verne book, for example, like, even though they're in Oregon, within this time period, there's no mention of a Native American population. There's no mention of what America is going through. It's just about these two cities that are being built there. But it's not about America. Now, Jules Verne has written a book about America while the Native population was there. He's also dealt with he's also written a book that takes place in Southern Africa that also has characters from the Native population there. So he's not like ignorant of the idea, but it's just this particular book doesn't have that. And then the thing is, like, again, with oil happening in the 1920s, when you think about the jump in technology, the jump in ideology, is just crazy because it's just a 40-year difference. And that's the thing, because every time this book has those little outlines where it talks about the creation of the railroads, or not the creation, but basically the continued development of the railroads. It talks about Thomas Edison. It talks about creating the telegram. It talks about creating the first telephone. It also mentions the oil, the beginning of the oil industry in the US. All of this is taking place. And the thing is that, like, in this book, the Native Americans, the Native tribes, are, to be particularly honest, they're not that advanced in technology compared to the white population, which is why it was very easy to basically annihilate them. So it's almost, to me, it almost created a contradiction of feelings, because I definitely felt for the Native population, obviously, like the idea of being exterminated just because A, you're of a different race, because B, you're considered a nuisance to the new race that's come in. You seem to be a backward society that's basically an oxymoron to the creation of these new society. I understand all of it, but it's just wild. It's absolutely mind-boggling to see the difference. So it was crazy to think that while the Native American tribes, they here in the, again, 1860s and 1880s, this whole book is about them struggling just to exist, to continue existing as they were, as they are, as they've always been, as they have always wanted to be, and just realizing that it was never going to happen. It's just not going to happen with the way the world is and the technology. It's just not going to happen. It's impossible. We are too advanced now. There's no room for it, basically. And that was the thing that just created this crazy reading mood as I was reading. But you just really feel for this. There's this one page, it's 207. And the thing, it just follows the idea, there's this, that the Native Americans at a point, like, they were just saying, we just want a treaty, and we want you to respect that treaty. If you write a treaty, we will follow the rules. Just write the treaty. And this book mentions over and over times where the whites would force the Native American tribes to sign a treaty, and then the very next day they would break the whites would break their own treaty. Basically, they just kept doing that. They kept ignoring the treaties they created. They ignored the promises they made, etc., etc. And it's just consistent where, like, the Native Americans kept getting duped, or basically they were just, to be honest, too naive. They were just too good of people that they wanted to believe in the white man. They wanted to believe, like, if the white man can create this kind of technology, then the white man should be intelligent enough to be able to basically follow a promise. And so they kept just believing in the white man. The white man just kept deceiving them every time. So on this page, there was this one chief who says, I don't want to run over the mountains anymore. I want to make a big treaty. I will make a peace that will last. I will keep my word until the stones melt. I can do nothing more, for God made the white man and God made the Apache. And the Apache has just as much right to the country as the white man. I want to make a treaty that will last, so that both can travel over the country and have no trouble. As soon as the treaty is made, I want a piece of paper, so that I can travel over the country as a white man. I will put a rock down to show that when it melts, the treaty is to be broken. So a rock can't melt, basically. So to them, to this particular Apache chief, he's basically just saying, we won't break the treaty. But again, the white man just keeps doing that. And so that goes back again with the oil, with, like, our young character, he's an idealist. He would definitely be defending the Native Americans. He would be wanting them to live the way they're asking to live. But he would be struggling with the idea that America, or his father, is trying to create a new great America, and there's the concept of, can you have both, right? Can you have both? So yeah, that was kind of the reading, the mind process that was going behind reading all these books. Everything I read was fantastic, but this definitely created this very strange like haze over all my reading, where I couldn't stop thinking, what is the timeline behind all of the books that I'm reading, which I thought was really, really fascinating, and added a whole new level to the reading experience. Now, one book that didn't really fit with all of that was Eugénie Grandet by Balzac. I did read this as well. Eugénie Grandet is basically about this young woman, Eugénie, who is going to inherit a great fortune from her father when he passes, except she doesn't know that yet. Basically, her father is a Scrooge. He's misery, I think that's the word, misery. He's very counts his pennies. Basically, he lives in his study counting his pennies, counting his gold, making sure no one knows what he's doing, making sure he hides the money. He does everything he can to bleed out other people so he can get all the money he can. And so again, as he's pinching his pennies and he's making this great fortune, and he at the same time he doesn't want anyone to know about it, so his own home, he doesn't allow more than like one slice of butter on the morning bread. When it comes to fixing the staircase, he's like, oh no, I can do it myself. We don't need to put money in it. Like, I'll just put a new board. I can do that myself. It'll be fine. So sort of that kind of idea. He limits the supplies that their only maid can have, can bring in via money. He gives very little money to his wife, only like a few little pieces of like the lowest denomination of coin, so that she can maybe buy some thread for her sewing work. So he's a very miserable man who just likes adding zeros to his fortune, but lives very poorly. And the thing is that the people around him, so his two partners, one a notary and one of a banker, are very much aware of how much money he has, because obviously they know his business. And so they're trying to marry, one of them's trying to marry their son and the other one's trying to marry their nephew to Eugénie. They're trying to create this connection so that one day they will have their hands on her fortune. But unfortunately for the father, his brother's son, or Eugénie's cousin, or the father's nephew, shows up into town one day with a letter from his father, and he shows up all gallant and noble and very bourgeois, with all this like with the finest pressed silks and gold on the tip of his cane, etc. And he comes in and he says, I have a letter from my father. My father told me to come here. And when the father reads the letter, it basically says, the letter from his brother, the brother basically saying, I'm bankrupt, I'm killing myself. When you get this letter, I will be dead, and I'm asking you to take care of my son, your nephew. And this creates great problems when basically our young Eugénie falls in love with her cousin, her first love. But the father sends the young man away to make sure that nothing happens, basically. And so it becomes this very tragic story about Eugénie Grandet's fate as the sole inheritess of this wealth, and the people who are going after her to try and get their hands on the money. So this was absolutely fantastic. Balzac, I've read, I think it was my third Balzac, I think, and I would say he's definitely I would actually say he's more difficult to read than Zola. Zola is known for being a difficult read, but I would say Balzac's actually more difficult. But the thing is, like Zola, Balzac is really about realism, and it's really about sort of the bad side of the human condition. So in this particular book, again, it's about greed. There's a little bit of corruption, but it's mostly about greed and just deception and the idea of faking your family love, and just manipulation, using love to manipulate people. So Balzac definitely was a master of his craft in this book. Very, 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 very good. And then for me, it was extra special because this book was my grandfather's book, and he read in November 2005, which was maybe a few months before his pass. So this is probably one of the last books he read before he died. And I know it's his book because he always underlines the names of characters when he first encounters them, so he can make sure he like remembers what they are, and he'll like underline their particular physical traits so that he also memorized that. He always underlines dates so that he would get a better feel for, again, timelines, historically what was going on at the time. And then every once in a while he'll underline a sentence or two that has a concept that he thinks is maybe interesting or something he wants to think about. So it's nice knowing that I read this book 20 years after he did, basically. So those are all the books that I read, the novels and nonfiction that I read in April. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I did read volumes 16 through 25, which is basically me continuing my read of this soccer manga, which I talked about in my last wrap-up video. I'm still having a lot of fun with this. I still say that this is a soccer manga more for people who like soccer versus people who like sports manga, but I'm having a good time with this. I'm not sure, I end up going in a different direction than I thought. I thought I would be finishing this series by the beginning of May, but I don't think I'll even finish it in the month of May, just because I've been reading other things more so than manga, but still enjoying that very much. So yeah, there you go. That's everything I read in the month of April. This time I do have some videos that I am filming so that the next time you see me won't be a wrap up. It'll be something else. So I hope you enjoy that. Thank you so much for watching me today, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!